Have you ever stopped to think what your life would look like if everything about your origin was against you? Not just a little disadvantage, not just a bad day, but everything. Your birthplace, your status, your identity. Because today most people believe their problem is lack of time, or lack of motivation, or maybe too many distractions, dopamine, social media, endless scrolling. But the truth is, the problem has never been time. The problem has never been opportunity. The problem is the system you live by. And you're not alone in this. Right now, millions of people wake up every morning with plans to change. They say they'll be more disciplined, more focused, more in control. But by the end of the day, they fall back into the same loop. Delay, distraction, excuses, an endless cycle. Now here's something most people don't realize. Researchers from Harvard University and Stanford University have shown that willpower alone is unreliable. It fades under stress. It collapses under pressure. But systems endure. Which brings us to something far older than modern psychology, an ancient Eastern philosophy, a way of thinking forged in isolation, refined through discipline, and proven in the harshest conditions imaginable. A philosophy where identity is not given, it is built. Where repetition becomes power, and discipline becomes freedom. After this video, you will never look at your daily habits the same way again, because I'm going to show you exactly how this system works. Not through theory, not through motivation, but through a real story. A man who had every reason to fail, and yet didn't. No resources, no status, no advantage, only discipline. Welcome to the channel, where we build a community around timeless wisdom and unbreakable minds. And today, I'm going to tell you the story of a man named Yasuke. A man who was born into poverty, captured, sold into slavery, taken to a land that rejected everything about him. Different language, different culture, different world. And somehow, he became something no one thought was possible. A samurai. But here's the part most people miss. This is not just a story about history. It's a blueprint, a system, a way to transform identity itself. So if you want to take control of your mind, if you want to break out of the loop you're stuck in, make sure to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and comment below what you struggle with the most right now. Because the truth is, change doesn't start with watching. It starts with commitment, and what you're about to see might challenge everything you believe about your limits. Chapter 1. The Man with No Identity. Let me tell you a story about a man who started with nothing. No name, no status, no future. In today's video, I'm going to tell you the story of Yasuke, but not as history remembers him. I'm going to show you the version most people ignore. The beginning, before the legend, before the armor, before the swords, back when he was just a product, around his early 20s, born somewhere along the Sharak coast of Africa, likely in Mozambique, a place rich in culture, but powerless against the systems of the time. He didn't choose his life. It was taken from him, captured, separated from his family, thrown into chains, and placed inside the suffocating darkness of a slave ship. No control, no voice, just survival. Now pause for a second, because this is where most people break. Not physically, mentally. The truth is, most people don't fail when life gets hard. They fail when they believe they've lost control. And that's exactly what this situation was designed to do. Strip identity, destroy hope, create obedience, an endless cycle. Sound familiar? Different time. Same pattern. Today people aren't chained in ships, but they are trapped. Trapped in routines they hate, trapped in distractions they can't escape, trapped in a life they didn't consciously choose. Scrolling, avoiding, delaying, a modern form of slavery. And you're not alone in this. But here's where Yasuke became different. While others gave in to despair, he didn't, he observed. Every movement of the sailors, every command spoken in Portuguese, every system of power on that ship, he was learning. Not because he was free, but because he refused to be mentally owned. This was his first act of discipline, not action, awareness. Because the truth is, The problem was never the chains. The problem is when the mind accepts them. And Yasuke didn't, not for a second. While others saw an ending, he saw a beginning. A brutal one, but still, a beginning. And what he did next would change everything. Chapter 2. The Collapse of the Ordinary Mind. This is where most stories end. Not with death, but with surrender. Yasuke had survived the journey, but survival is not transformation. He arrived in Japan as property, owned by a Jesuit missionary. No freedom, no identity, no control over his future. Just another foreign servant in one of the most closed societies in the world. And everything was against him. The language unknown, the culture alien, the hierarchy ruthless. In Japan at that time, your birth decided your worth. And Yasuke was at the bottom. Now understand this. Most people believe they fail because life is unfair. But the truth is, they fail because they accept the role they are given. And Yasuke was given the lowest one possible. So what do most people do in that situation? They shrink. They avoid attention. They stay quiet. They wait. They tell themselves, this is just how life is. And slowly, they disappear. Different century. Same behavior. Today it looks like this. You wake up tired. You check your phone. You delay your work. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow. Again. And again. And again. An endless loop, not because you're weak, but because you've accepted a system that keeps you that way. And you're not alone in this. But Yasuke didn't follow that pattern. He didn't collapse internally, even when everything external told him to. He refused to become what his environment expected. No complaints. No excuses. Just awareness. Because the truth is, the problem was never his position. The problem would have been accepting it. And Yasuke didn't. Not even close. Instead of breaking, he started adapting. Silently. Strategically. And that decision is where everything began to change. Chapter 3. The encounter that changed everything. And then, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. Let me tell you about a moment that most people would have missed. Yasuke was still a servant, still invisible in the system, but by now, he was no longer the same man. He had been watching, learning, adapting, every day. And that's when he came into contact with a man who would change the trajectory of his life. Oda Nobunaga, the most feared warlord in Japan. A man obsessed with power, but even more obsessed with potential. Now understand this. Power recognizes patterns, and Nobunaga saw something no one else could see. Not a slave, not a foreigner, but presence, calm, sharp, unshaken. While others would lower their eyes, Yasuke didn't overreact. He didn't try to impress. He didn't beg for approval. He simply stood there, fully aware, fully present. And that's rare, because the truth is, most people change who they are when they stand in front of power. They become smaller, weaker, less themselves, but Yasuke didn't. And that was the moment of discovery. Not for him, for Nobunaga. He tested him, his strength, his awareness, his composure, and Yasuke passed, without trying to prove anything. Because by this point, he wasn't pretending anymore. He had already started becoming. This is the principle most people miss. Transformation doesn't happen when you are chosen. It happens long before that, in silence, in repetition, in discipline. Nobunaga didn't create Yasuke. He recognized him, and that changes everything. Because the truth is, the right opportunity doesn't transform you. It reveals who you've already become, and Yasuke was no longer a slave, not in his mind, not in his presence, and soon, the world would be forced to see it too. Chapter 4. The Kaizen System. This is where everything becomes dangerous, because now, we're no longer talking about talent, we're talking about a system. Yasuke didn't wake up one day and become exceptional. He built it, piece by piece, day by day. This is the philosophy known as Kaizen. Small improvements, relentless repetition, no negotiation. But here's the part most people get wrong. Kaizen is not about doing more, it's about becoming different. Through consistency, Yasuke didn't try to master everything at once. He broke it down. First, language. One word, then another, then full sentences, every day, then movement, practicing combat, without a sword, repeating gestures, footwork, balance, again and again, then culture, observing rituals, understanding hierarchy, learning when to speak and when to stay silent. Slow progress, invisible progress, but progress, because the truth is, the problem has never been difficulty. The problem is inconsistency. Most people go all in for a few days, then stop. They rely on motivation, and motivation fades. But Yasuke didn't rely on emotion. He relied on structure, a system that didn't ask how he felt, only what he did. Every day, no excuses, no shortcuts, just repetition. And something started to happen. Neuroscience calls it adaptation. The brain rewires itself through repeated action. Habits move from effort to automation. What was once hard becomes natural. What was once foreign becomes identity. Yasuke didn't learn to act like a samurai. He trained until it was no longer an act. This is the real power of Kaizen. Not improvement, transformation. Because in the end, you don't rise to your goals. You fall to your systems. Chapter 5. The breaking point. This is where most people collapse. Not at the beginning. Not when things are hard, but when they realize hard doesn't end. Yasuke had already become a samurai. He had the title, the respect, the position. But here's the truth. Titles don't remove pressure. They multiply it. Every day he trained. 12 hours. Sometimes more. Sword drills. Strategy. Rituals. Again. And again. And again. And then the cracks appeared. Fatigue. Doubt. Isolation. There were moments he failed. Missed strikes. Slow reactions. Mental lapses. Moments where his body refused. Where his mind whispered, enough. This is relapse. Not quitting completely, but slipping. Losing edge. Losing focus. Becoming ordinary again. And here's the dangerous part. No one would blame him. A former slave, already outperforming warriors born into power, he had every excuse to slow down. But he didn't, because Yasuke was no longer driven by results. He was driven by identity. He didn't train to improve. He trained because that's who he was. A warrior trains, even when tired, especially when tired. So when he failed, he didn't negotiate. He returned. Next day, same discipline, no motivation, no emotion, just system. This is what most people never understand. Discipline is not about perfection. It's about recovery speed. How fast you return after you fall. Yasuke didn't win because he never broke. He won because breaking never changed his direction. Every relapse became reinforcement. Every failure, proof. Proof that the system was still running. And slowly, something terrifying was built. Consistency without emotion, action without resistance, an identity that could not be shaken. Chapter 6. The science behind discipline. But here's the part most people ignore. This isn't just philosophy, it's biology. Because every time Yasuke chose discipline, his brain was changing. Literally. There's a region in your brain called the amygdala. Its job is simple, protect you from danger. But it doesn't know the difference between real danger and discomfort. So when you try to train, to focus, to push beyond your limits, it fires. Fear, resistance, doubt, that voice that says, stop, later. Not today, that's not weakness. That's your brain trying to keep you safe. But here's the problem. If you obey it, you stay the same. Now on the other side, you have the prefrontal cortex. This is where discipline lives. Decision, control, long-term thinking. Every time Yasuke chose to act, instead of react, he strengthened this part. Again, and over time, something powerful happens. It's called neuroplasticity. Your brain rewires itself based on what you repeat. Not what you want, not what you plan, what you do, daily. That's why the system works, because discipline is not about forcing yourself. It's about training your brain until discipline becomes automatic, until resistance gets weaker, and action becomes your default. The truth is, Yasuke didn't become strong by chance. He became inevitable. This is where everything comes together. Not history, not philosophy, but truth. Because the story of Yasuke was never just about becoming a samurai. It was about something far more dangerous, becoming someone else. Let's strip this down to what actually matters. No complexity, no theory, just principles. First, discipline begins in the mind. Yasuke didn't wait for freedom. He built awareness inside captivity. Second, adaptation beats resistance. He didn't fight his environment emotionally. He studied it. He used it. Third, systems beat motivation. He didn't rely on how he felt. He relied on what he repeated. Every day, no negotiation. And finally, identity is built, not given. He didn't act like a samurai. He became one. That's it. That's the system. Now here's the part most people avoid. You. Because it's easy to watch this story and feel inspired for a moment. But inspiration without action is just entertainment. So here's your challenge. Not 30 days, not some extreme transformation. Just 7. For the next 7 days, wake up 1 hour earlier. No excuses. Do one hard thing. First, before your phone. Before distractions. Repeat it. Every day. Even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. Because that's where identity starts to shift. Not when it's easy, but when it's uncomfortable. The truth is, you don't fail when life is hard. You fail when you stop showing up. And you're not alone in this. Everyone struggles. Everyone hesitates. Everyone feels resistance. But not everyone decides to become different. So here's the question you need to answer. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Right now. Will you continue living by default? Or will you build yourself deliberately? Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until life forces you. Because the truth is, it will. And when it does, you'll wish you had started earlier. Thank you for watching until the end of this video. If this message meant something to you, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and comment below. I choose discipline. Make it public. Make it real. And if you're serious about changing your life, watch the next video on your screen. Because this is only the beginning. Remember, discipline is not punishment. It is freedom. Be present. Walk with honor. Follow the path.